welcome. This is Preeti. We are creating this bright and beautiful card using the stamp set called Butterfly and Flowers, which just released this month. And I'm going to do some simple masking. And for that, I'm using this masking paper that I have, which is completely sticky at the back. So it's by post-it notes is what that makes that creates that masking. So that's what I have with me. And then I'm also using hot press watercolor cardstock, and I've mentioned this many times in my videos earlier. Hot press is a smoother watercolor cardstock, and it's very good when you're creating cards, and you'll see why I've used it as we move on. And I'm also going to use VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which is a pigment ink, and some clear embossing powder. Pigment ink remains wet for a little while, so it gives me some time to heat emboss it. So I'm just using clear embossing powder. I've also realized if you're afraid or if you're scared of using your Copics on when you use embossing powder, many people have a fear that they might spoil the tip. I've realized that some reason the clear embossing powder doesn't seem to do that, or I've heard, I don't know about it, I've heard other crafters telling me. I have never had an issue with Copics on any embossing powder. Actually, I just try to avoid touching my tip to the embossing bed as much as possible. So that is a little tip here. And so I'm just going to build a bunch of flowers. And as you see that little flower bunch is quite small there. So I want more of it. So here's where the masking comes to play. And that plastic sheet that I've added in between is to protect my cardstock because I had not cleaned it between the stamping. So I had got some color on it, or black ink on my cardstock. So to avoid that, I'm using a clear plastic to place my stamp before I'm ready to stamp. And here you can see how I've created those masks using that masking paper that I talked about earlier. And all I've done is I've cut the cut the flower using that mask, and I've just adhered in places where I don't want the flowers to stamp on. So what that mask does is it avoids it from stamping, and that's how I'm going to build this entire bunch of flowers as if it was like in a garden in a corner. There's a lot of flowers, but I also kept that this particular stamp set has a little ribbon on the like it's a bouquet holding a ribbon. So I wanted that ribbon to be on that top left there, you can see, and the right edge in the corner. So I've left that just to kind of create a cohesive look, as if there's a ribbon going from one end to the other end. I hope that makes sense. And here you can see how I filled up that entire left edge of that cardstock using that masking, and it almost looks like I've used a large stamp set with those flowers. And sometimes when you're using masks, you might miss a certain spot. So all I'm doing is I'm just taking a black ink pen here, and I'm just going to draw in some of those lines where I've missed the stamping. And then I'm going to color these using Copic. Remember I said I used hot press watercolor cardstock, and this is the reason. Because I'm going to use my Copics, I wanted the surface to be smooth. I didn't want it to be having those bumps and ridges or texture, which usually a watercolor cardstock has, which is the cold press cardstock. And because I'm using a hot press in this case, the surface is smooth, and that helps me to use Copic markers. And you'll be wondering, why am I even using a watercolor cardstock for Copics? I could have very well used a Nina Solar White or any white cardstock for my Copics. And the reason for that is I want to use multimedia or mixed media for this card. What it means by mixed media is using multiple mediums of coloring for your project. So in this case, I'm starting off with Copics, and here I'm coloring the lilies as I was ranting away. all I'm doing is I'm coloring it from the center to the out, so keeping the darkest color in the center of the lily and the lightest of the yellow to the edges of the lily. It's like what you see in lilies in the gardens. They have that center of the petal darker and the edges of the petal lighter. So that's what I'm trying to recreate. And then just adding dots using the darkest of my color. In this case, it was E18 to add those dots to the center of the lilies. And for the second flower, so there are only two kinds of flowers in this particular bouquet. So there's the lilies and I don't know what they are. They kind of look like I don't know what they look like. Maybe petunias? I am not sure. So I'm just coloring them with a nice bright pink color, and I've chosen some RV shades in here. I will have these colors in the description box below as to what I have used them. Again, the idea of this card was to show you masking to build a larger scene. So you can really use that mask to create a scene with the dogs that came up with the new release this month, which is called Yoga Dogs. And you can stamp a dog and you can stamp another dog behind it, showing as if all those dogs are in a yoga class, having doing yoga. So you can mask off some dogs to show them that one is behind the other or one is in the front of the other. And that's what masking does. It's just creating or building a scene by putting some images at the back and some images in the front. Over the next week or so, I will also show you a couple more methods of masking, and that's the reason why I'm calling this particular series as in this particular video as easy masking part 1. So I promise you there's going to be a part 2 very soon coming your way. And then all I did is I also colored some flower leaves, and then for the banner or the ribbon I am using some purple colors. And again, I'm just trying to create some kind of a variation in that, so I'm just keeping the darkest color in the center of the ribbon, and then to lighter to the edges, and that kind of shows us that the ribbon is tied, so there is like a pull in the center which creates a darker edges. I hope that makes sense. I really hope that makes sense. You can see I'm doing it the second time. So I went with the darkest color in the center, and then I'm blending it outward, and I'm keeping, if you see that curve of the ribbon, I'm keeping those colors, or I'm using my pens to keep with that curves to show that the ribbon is curved and it has those pulled edges, and that's why they're darker in those corners. And I'm going to complete coloring the entire surface just like that, and here you can see the whole thing is completed. And I've also gone ahead and stamped and embossed 2 butterflies from the same stamp set. And I'm just going to use some aqua colors here. So in this case, I've used BG19, BG13 and BG11 and BG10, just to create like an ombre. Sorry about my my phone, it just keeps going off if you're hearing it buzz on me. Anyway, so I've just gone ahead and colored both those colors, and then I want to create a background, and for that I'm using some color fuse inks, and I've chosen a deep purple, a deep blue and a deep aqua color. And this is the reason why I used watercolor cardstock. I wanted the background to be watercolor, because I wanted that to have, I mean, I could do that with Copics, but I feel like when you do watercoloring for watercoloring backgrounds with Copics, you tend to use a lot of ink. And for those of you who don't know about Copics can be quite pricey to buy. So I thought, instead of using Copics to create that for watercolor cardstock and use up all my inks in my Copics, I would rather go use my color fuse inks, which works beautifully for watercoloring. And that's what I'm doing. I'm just adding some really deep purples and blues and aquas in the background to create that watercolor surface. And you can see, because and you can see how it worked out. The watercolor cardstock worked out. And now, before I add those butterflies down, I need to add the sentiment. And for that, I'm just using one of the sentiments, which reads faith, in everything, sorry, faith in things unseen. And I'm just going to, I just used my heat gun there to just dry off any wetness, because I'm going to use embossing powder and I don't want that to stick anywhere. And I've done the same thing, embossed it with the clear embossing powder after I used the black ink. And then for the butterfly, all I'm going to do is add a little bit of adhesive in the center of the body of the butterfly, because I want the wings to pop out. So I'm just going to add that to the center. And you can see there, when I cut the butterflies, I did not cut the antennas. And it's an easy fix for that. All I did is, after I adhered the butterfly, I used the black pen and added the antennas freehand. So how easy was that? And then you can see I'm just popping up the butterflies on the surface. And then all that was left to do was to add some gemstones. So here I'm using some iridescent gemstone in a scattering, but I also added some clear dew drops. That's what they call. So they're just gemstones, not gems actually. They're kind of drops that look like clear dewdrops, and I felt like this particular card, a dewdrop, would look really nice. So I just kind of mixed a few different kinds of gemstones. Again, it's a mixed media, so I've used all kinds of mediums in this particular card. So you can see stamping, you can see masking, and Copics and watercolors and embossing, all fun things. And then all that was left to do was to add this panel directly onto a top folding white note card. I did not use any foam adhesive this time. I kept it very flat because there's so much going on in this card, and yet it's just, I felt it's beautiful. It's so bright, it's so colorful. I really love this, and I hope you give this masking a go, and give us a thumbs up if you like the video, subscribe to our channel, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.